Hello, I'm Sasha Nicole, and this is Nora Berkey, the Executive Director and founder of the Chain Collaborative. Today, Nora will share with us about the work the Chain Collaborative is doing in close to 50 countries worldwide to invest in the capacity of change leaders in coffee-growing regions and support them as they drive grassroots sustainable development in their own communities, steered by their own vision for change. So thank you for joining us today, Nora.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Before we dig in a little bit to the nuts and bolts of your work, could you just tell us a bit about the background of how the Chain Collaborative came to an existence and why coffee is such a vital link to this global food chain?
Sure. So I realize I even just said thanks for having us. I think of our organization, the Chain Collaborative, as so much of an us, but I am the founder, so I'll try to share kind of how I founded it and how the organization came into being from me and my vision initially, but really how it has evolved to be much more of a collective effort. So I started in the coffee industry as a barista in New York City during college, and that was really because I was buying a lot of coffee and just thought, well, gosh, I need to stop spending so much money on coffee and get it for free. So the best way to do that was to become a barista. So that's what I did. And I really fell into the world of specialty coffee. And it is a world. For anyone that doesn't know it that well, you could probably go into your favorite specialty coffee shop and just, there's a whole vibe in there. And it's this strange world. So people that fall in love with it really fall in love with it. And so that's how I started in the coffee industry, but my passion has always been with international development. And in particular, if I could kind of pick one issue that's really important to me, I would say it's inequity and income inequality, which, of course, touches so many other intersectionalities and really touches so many aspects of social justice and intersects with different things. But so when I started in coffee, that was kind of what came out as one of the most pressing issues was just, the idea that a coffee farmer and coffee farming family, might make less a day than, you might spend on a latte in a specialty coffee shop. And so kind of combining my passion for international development and combating income inequality and inequity with coffee. When I went back to school for my master's in sustainable development, I decided to focus on coffee. And so I did my master's research in Nicaragua, where I was evaluating kind of another element to income and inequality and inequity, which was in particular the unpaid work of women in supply chains. And so just quickly, as an example, in coffee, you might have a family farm. And the whole family does a lot of work on that farm. But when you're selling the crops, primarily it's one member of the family who makes that sale, and primarily it's the male head of household in coffee farming communities, and so they usually control the income. So when I graduated from my master's, I realized what I wanted to do was work with coffee farming communities, but in particular to allow them to sort of see through the vision and realize the vision they had for their own community. Because what's typical in coffee and really beyond in development is that the programs get designed by a company or a nonprofit somewhere else and kind of delivered to a community, and the community can kind of take it or leave it. Sure, we'll take that project or no. And so I wanted to create an opportunity where people could design their own projects and see those through. And so, I kind of often say that, I kind of looked at my future. I was 25 at the time. I'm 32 now, so giving that away. But, I didn't see that there were a lot of opportunities in coffee and sustainability. Even then, I think it was just starting to become more of a kind of common job or common conversation. And so I said, well, I don't really have the experience beyond what I've done in school. And so I can either wait 10 years to get the position that I want, or I can just create it. And so I created it and founded the Chain Collaborative. But I do think I was a little bit naive at the time in terms of this will be easy. And it certainly has not been. But, I think all founders probably have a little hint of craziness in them or naivety at first, and then they just have to gut it out, which is what I did.
on that note, you know, for people, because I think this field draws a lot of big dreamers, and I think sometimes we forget to factor in the challenges that are going to come. Do you have any insights or, you know, any advice you might offer to someone in your shoes? If you rewind back a few years, what would have been helpful for someone to tell you?
Yeah, you know, I think that what's always been really helpful for me is just the number of people that I guess recognize the passion that I had and kind of wanted to support that passion to grow, and I think that's what I try to do for people now, because I certainly, you know, met a lot of people that, you know, looked at me and my age and thought, well, this person doesn't know what she's doing and doesn't really know what she's talking about, and we don't need to listen to her. And you know, so I think I had to learn kind of on my own that's sort of a personality thing, and not everyone is that way. And I suppose, you know, had I been told that it's kind of, you know, it's typical that every founder is going to have to deal with that, it kind of, you know, would have been helpful, because I sort of thought, well, you know, this is the world, and this is always going to be this way. And you certainly get through it. And so I think I try to just now tell people that, you know, I recognize as kind of are in my shoes and the place that I was, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, and just say, you know, not everyone is going to be that way. And there's going to be a lot of people that see potential in you and try to, you know, kind of ignite your passions. And I try to be that for people. But, you know, I think it's helpful to just know that not everyone is that way. And it's kind of like, it's not you, it's them, you know, just to remind people of that constantly.
Yeah. Excellent. Sage advice. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And then to dig in a little more into the nuts and bolts of your work, I understand that you have 4 main focus areas: investment in partnerships, organizational consultation, education, and innovation for special projects. So could you say a bit more about each area and why, or what are the intentions for each one?
Sure. So, yes, when we started the organization, the investment partnership program was the main work that we did. And it's really the flagship program. And it wasn't called that when we started, but it is our methodology to invest in local leaders in coffee communities to realize their own visions for development in their own community. And so what we do is we call kind of our partnership with them accompaniment, which is really we are accompanying their vision and accompanying their work in their community. It's actually a term that comes from conflict work, where you know, as an international volunteer, for example, you might accompany an activist as they're kind of protesting or something like that. And it recognizes that they're doing the work, they're doing the real kind of activism work, and you're sort of bringing an international eye to that and shining a light on the work that they're doing. And in that way, in conflict work, it kind of provides a bit of protection, because you sort of have all the eyes on, you know, on this endeavor. And so, but I think it really works in development, which is just to say, you know, we're not the activists on the ground doing this work. That's our partners and the local leaders. So we're serving to bring kind of some attention to their initiative and their effort, and provide what they need, you know. Whether it's looking over a proposal, saying what we think, or, you know, trying to provide funding, or, you know, our advice, whatever it is, that's kind of our role. So yes, that's our main programmatic work, is investing in the visions of local leaders through our investment partnership program. And we have projects right now and partners in Uganda, Rwanda, and Ecuador. We also worked in Nicaragua in the past. And then our other pillars of work are actually based on our need for income diversity. So, you know, not relying solely on donations. So we started consulting in 2006 to basically share our knowledge and provide services to like-minded organizations. And we do a variety of different services, mostly geared towards supporting programs and evaluation, some research. And then we also developed another earned income model, which is providing courses in sustainability, coffee sustainability in particular. So we collaborated with the Specialty Coffee Association, which is the global association, and designed, along with three other colleagues of mine, a global sustainability curriculum for coffee. And so I've now taught, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you talk about the coffee sustainability, does that mean from an agricultural standpoint or from a different standpoint, or what does that mean specifically?
Great question. It means all of it. So definitely from an agricultural standpoint, but we look at the whole value chain.
Okay.
And we actually kind of frame it from the very beginning in conversations about power. And so just kind of as one example of this, the 90% of the total value and wealth from the coffee value chain as a whole stays in the global north and consuming countries. So everyone consumes, all countries consume, but the countries that don't produce coffee and therefore are buying coffee from other nations are called the consuming nations. And so they are primarily in the global north and maintain 90% of the wealth. Whereas only 10% of the wealth stays in producing countries, which essentially just means that the sector was designed to benefit the buyer and the consumer, and not the producer, not the farmer. And this has roots in colonialism and the enslavement of people and trafficking of people. So which is another thing we go into in the sustainability curriculum. But it's that it looks at climate change, agronomy, the role of women, and so it's quite extensive.
Thanks for clarifying, because I think sustainability is kind of a buzzword in this sector, and I think it is important to define what does that mean, and very specifically how is that executed, because you can say something is sustainable, but I think it's important to demonstrate the strategy behind it that's really showing.
Yeah, and we go through a couple definitions of sustainability kind of throughout the ages, so to speak, and like when it first arrived and what contexts, and I don't want to get into my lesson right now, but yeah, we got to go through that historically and kind of how it came to be, so people can start to understand and analyze better if someone says they're a sustainable coffee company or a sustainable farm. What do they really mean? And the goal is really to allow students to kind of ask the right questions and dig into the right things. What are you doing socially, environmentally, economically, rather than just sort of accepting at face value what's being told. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So so those are our three programs, and then we do have one more, which is we just call that innovation, and that is basically things that don't fit into our model, into those three programs: the education, consulting, or investment, but we still want to work on and work with. And so, our name is the Chain Collaborative, and it's really anyone that wants to collaborate with us and do something. There's really an opportunity. And so we kind of fit those into our innovation bucket, and we call those our special projects. And so right now we are fiscally sponsoring a library, a community-led library in a small coffee community in Nicaragua. And so, it's just kind of a one-room library that works in this really small community. And so it just as an example of an initiative that doesn't have a lot of support, in terms of like institutional support, but is really an awesome community-led initiative.
Excellent. Okay. And why is it so important to support local leaders instead of bringing in, say, a consultant from the U.S. or another country?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think, there's, I guess, a lot of ways to answer this question, and a lot of reasons why we think that, to go back to the term sustainability, why we think this is more sustainable. I think it kind of just starts from the perspective, though, of it kind of being the next, I would say, sort of like the next frontier, a little bit of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. There's a man from Memphis, Tennessee, that started a company called Coffee Black, and his name is Bart Henderson, and Bart Jones. His email last name is Henderson. I always get that confused. Bart Jones, and he talks about his sort of whole motto is "Make coffee black again," and he talks about coffee being stolen from Ethiopians, which is where coffee was originally discovered by Ethiopians themselves, and then it was kind of traveled throughout the rest of the world and spread throughout the world through, of course, colonial powers. And so he kind of started talking about put it back into the hands and the ownership of Black people, and in the U.S. in particular, it's kind of been seen as maybe coffee shops are not for Black people. They're very associated with gentrification, and there have been less people of color in the industry than white people, especially at higher sort of quote unquote higher paid and better positions. So anyway, he was talking about as we in this past year think about diversity, it's not about hiring more people of color and including them in your staff, for example. It's about investing in people of color who are the leaders of organizations or the founders or the owners. And so I think it really, although I didn't have the words to sort of describe it that way, which I do now, I think, thanks to people like Bart and his vision and his expertise, but I feel like that's always sort of been the vision. It's not about me or someone else starting a coffee company and hiring people in Nicaragua, and giving them those jobs. Obviously, jobs and job creation is great, but it's really about can we invest in local ownership there so that they can keep the wealth stays there. It's from there. It's all kind of homegrown. And so I think there's kind of a political reason why we do that, but I think the other thing is it's frankly just it's more efficient. If you're to do a training and you want to hire a trainer, traveling hiring a foreign consultant and having them fly to Nicaragua to provide a training is not cost effective, right? And it's impossible in times like COVID. So you're sort of bringing somebody, and the knowledge it's not from there, so it's not as culturally relevant. And so there's just a lot of reasons why it makes a lot more sense, I think, to do things locally. So yeah.
And then how does your team determine which projects or partners to invest in?
So yeah, we really focus on value alignment. I think this is kind of the challenge too, I think, with coffee is it's you might hear about a locally roasted coffee if you're in the United States, it's locally roasted coffee. That's as far as you can get. There is coffee grown in Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and then some parts of Southern California now, although it's super expensive and it's very elite, I would say. But so unless you're from those parts of the US, then coffee is not local. You have to buy it from somewhere else where it's grown in the tropics. And so I think that sometimes, when you talk about collaboration with farmers, and this is, farmer, people kind of talk when they sell their coffee, they talk about the farmer kind of a lot. I think there's this perception of, you're sort of automatically investing in kind of people from other parts of the world. You're sort of always kind of investing in farming and sustainability, no matter what coffee you're buying. But I think the reality is that there are levels, and there are some farmers that are wealthier than others, and there's a huge diversity in the kind of farmer that you can buy from. And so that could be a farmer who lives in another part of the world and simply owns a farm somewhere else and never goes there, doesn't pay their farm workers well, or you can be buying from a small scale family farmer who works the land themselves. And so with the colonial history of coffee, you also have a lot of families that kind of adopted a lot of those colonial ways, let's say, and it still is kind of, the farm is maintained that way. So, keeping all of that in mind, we're really looking for kind of value alignment and really reject the idea that, just because I'm working with somebody in another part of the world, that automatically kind of makes me this multicultural person who recognizes, all of these cultural dynamics, right, and all these power dynamics. So we really look for people that are aligned in servant leadership with us, are really combating these colonial legacies in coffee, and want to see transformation in their community, from a kind of an equity standpoint. And so it's hard, right? Because it is hard to build a sustainable business in the world that we're in, and keep all those things in mind. But I think it's about constantly working towards improvement, and that's what we look for. So.
And then just a little bit more in depth on that, is your team, do you have people within each country who are helping you source out these partners who can answer some of those culturally, locally relevant questions that maybe you can't necessarily assess from where you are? Or how does your team go about that?
Sure. Yeah. So our team, one of our team members, our programs manager, she's in Nicaragua. And then I used to live there as well for about 5 years. My husband is from Nicaragua. And then we've had some team members that have lived in other parts of the world, like Mexico, for example. But we're a remote team. So, right now, two of us I'm in the U.S., my programs manager is in Nicaragua, and then another, our development communications assistant. She actually travels all around the U.S. and world right now, kind of volunteering on organic farms when she's not, she's part-time with us. Okay. So we're a very remote team in that sense. And we have a partnership assessment. So people so far, like our partners have really found us, and we evaluate through a partnership assessment. But we have found, as you're saying, I mean, it's difficult, right? When you don't have, an existing partner in that country, who knows the group, and who can kind of serve as a, not so much a vetting, but just like, knowing who people are and that they are value aligned, because, filling a piece of paper out, you can kind of say whatever, right? So, so what we've actually done recently is we rely more on coffee industry allies. So, for example, importing companies that have a direct relationship with farming groups and have worked with them for years, and kind of that those companies are very value aligned with us as well, and can share the value alignment of their partners. So, but I would say that we've also just people have found us, and through conversation and through relationship building, we've really been able to see that they are kind of value aligned. So we're really quite open to anything, and feel like you can kind of find a diamond in the rough in any way. So we're quite open to it. But we do set up like a relationship trust building phase before we get into any investment, and it's to kind of test that out. Like, do we work together? Not just do we like you, but do you like us? It's like they might decide, what, this organization's not for me in the end.
Yeah, no, you definitely want to make sure it's a fit, because it's an investment for both parties. So that's good. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And so if anyone listening wanted to support or be involved in your work, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so there's, always ways to get involved with us, and especially because of our different program models. And so, with our investment partnership program, obviously, we're always looking for funding and investment there. We have monthly donor initiatives. We, of course, one-time donations are always accepting those, foundation support, company support. But then we also do consulting, of course, and that's a really great way to support our work by hiring us for things that you might need. So again, we do proposal writing and development, design of monitoring and evaluation frameworks. We've done research into different initiatives, sustainability reports. We do quite a number of things for a lot of our clients. And then, of course, taking our courses is another way to support. So we have our courses that we give at a foundation, intermediate, and professional level. And so we're actually looking now to expand some of our course offerings, because those are given in collaboration with the Specialty Coffee Association, but we're looking to expand out in terms of, what is sort of the average coffee lover or coffee enthusiast who's not a part of the coffee industry, how could they learn more? So we're trying to develop some new offerings, and also building some collaborations with some universities as well, to provide courses. And that's one way, or another way. Yeah, and then again, like I said, if with the special project initiatives, really, if there's kind of anything people want to do to collaborate, we're typically kind of finding a way, and we're always building new things. So if there's an initiative that somebody has and they want to share with us and see how we can be involved, and we invite that conversation. And we used to have some volunteers. It's been challenging, with COVID, but I think most of our work is online. So at least to collaborate with us, it's pretty easy even now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your website, would that be the best place for people to go to be able to access all of those opportunities?
Absolutely, yeah. Our contact page on the website, and I have a donate link there and everything. So, yeah.
We'll make sure that that's in the description. So for anyone listening, that's easily accessible. So great. And then how we talked about a little bit about sustainability, but how can you be sure that what you're funding is viable and sustained long term?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that one of the easiest ways to we sort of know that we're investing in something that can be long term is because we're really working with coffee enterprises. So we're working with organizations that are trying to build a viable and sustainable business based on the value chain, based on the sale of coffee. And so in many cases the work that we're doing is kind of seed funding for certain initiatives. And so, just as an example, one of the cooperatives that we invested in Nicaragua, they wanted to start a alternative beekeeping project, so for alternative income. And so we invested in the initial training for that for a group of 10 women, and the kind of initial startup kits. And then they were then earning income kind of, and then being able to reinvest back into their beekeeping business. And so, not every project is like that, but I think, we have school projects, for example, because one of our partners in Uganda, Now Africa Initiative, they founded a primary school that we supported them to build in 2016. And I always kind of tell people, like, the problem with kids is, like, they're the most sustainable thing because they sustain the species, but they're also the least sustainable thing because you can't, like, a kid needs to grow up and become, part of society and contribute in that way. But, when you invest in schools, it's like you're year over year have to spend money on children and their education. And that's really the role of governments typically. And in places like Uganda, where those governments are not as resourced, in rural areas are not getting the resources that do exist for a number of reasons. Nonprofits tend to be just giving, more and more money every year, right? But despite that, we recognize funding is needed for sure, year over year. But we try to build programs that are going to be sustainable. So, for example, we funded a organic garden. And so the idea was, to be able to then have, so that the produce supports the school lunches. And then parents actually pay school fees for their kids to go to school, which helps supplement teacher income. And with lunch being provided, they need to spend less on their kids there. Then we sell some of the produce to, maintain the garden over time. So sort of build in little things like that to maintain it in the project. And so that's one of the roles that we play, is just sort of, asking our partners about the plans that they have for that, so we can build that sustainability in over time.
And I just heard there was a virtuous economic cycle, where it continues to go in a way that's healthy and allows for flourishing, and it doesn't, it doesn't do the reverse of that. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's hard, I think, because especially with climate change, sometimes, success looks like maintaining production year over year. It's not expanding production for an increased, sale. It's more savings because, you're able to grow food at home, so you're not spending, or, despite a big drought that year, you maintained your production because you've done this climate smart, agricultural work. So I think, it's kind of understanding it as that cycle, and I think divorcing it from like everything has to grow and more and more and more and more money and more production. It's also a matter of understanding the full holistic scope of what's happening in communities, and understanding that savings and maintaining production is equally as valuable as higher incomes, I think, at times.
I think that's a valuable point too, what you just said about success doesn't always mean growing. Sometimes it means simply saving or maintaining. Because I think in the nonprofit world, especially where we're so dependent on revenue from donors, there's this pressure to demonstrate, well, we've solved X amount of problems for X amount of people, and we did 10% better than last year, and aren't we doing great? And that doesn't always really translate to effective change on the ground. And I just appreciate you pointing that out, that it's important to think about what is an effective success rate. Does it mean, like you just said, hey, we didn't go into debt. We were okay,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I also think it's hard because so much of, what we do is, in a sense, it's marketing, right? I mean, that's fundraising. You're marketing what you're doing, and, some people will say it's, it is about the numbers, but it's more about, and I help people design their measurement frameworks. How are they going to measure their success? And it always depends, well, what does success mean to you? I mean, you kind of start there. And one of the earliest lessons I learned in development when I so before I did my master's degree and started focusing on coffee, kind of between my undergrad and my master's, I volunteered in Cambodia. And I kind of met two different organizations, both great, but one was focused on, not so much numbers, but they were focused on getting as many kids to school as possible. So, they have a program to provide bikes, so kids can ride bikes to school and be able to get there, or supplementing teacher salaries, so the teachers were always there, as opposed to having to farm at the same time and figure out, should I go to school today or should I farm, and I have to maintain both to survive. And so they did a lot of things to just like get kids in school. And then there was another organization that focused on, they had a tiny group of people, but they were like incredibly holistic about it. It was we're going to work with these 30 kids, but we're going to work with their families too, because we know that kids are not going to be able to thrive even in school, even if they're there, unless their family has the means to support them. So, they were doing all sorts of work with the family, supporting the families to have, income sources and things like that. And both of those require an incredible amount of resources, and both were really successful, but they just did different things. Like there's this one that was kind of this super deep dive, of a program, and one that was, we're simply going to provide the means for kids to get there. Managing how they get there is kind of up to them. And I think both are valuable, but if you have like a vision of, you have to work with hundreds of thousands of kids, that's success, but not working with their families and doing this deep dive, that's not enough kids. That's when you, I think, when you lack the nuance of that, it really kind of impacts what we think of as successful and what we think is kind of necessary, and the way to spend our money. So anyway, long-winded way to say I agree with you.
No, I loved hearing all of that, because I think there's a lot in there and I think about people who are listening to this and hopefully gleaning a lot of insights from it. So I think that was all really, really valuable. What are some of the barriers that your partners face in improving their situations?
Yeah, so the biggest is, it's something I teach a lot in my courses. And I mean, the biggest one is really just the low price of coffee. And, increasing the price of coffee, it's not as easy as, okay, now we're going to, double the price of coffee, for a number of reasons. But just over the course of the past 40 years, the market price for coffee has like fallen in half. It's been cut in half. And so, you see prices rising, cost of living for people rising throughout the world, and these prices of coffee are staying the same. And so having it based on, the market price, it's a price that's decided and traded by on the New York Stock Exchange for for Arabica, which is the main specialty, where the species of coffee that provides specialty coffee, where is called Arabica, and that's traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And so it's a really artificial price, right? It's based on traders that are sort of buying and selling. What do they think the price of coffee is going to be next week, this year, next season, but it's not based on the cost of production. And this is why I say it's a system that's designed for consumers. It's not like we set the price of coffee in a coffee shop because a farmer said it cost me such and such to grow this, therefore I want this much profit, right? Instead it's based on what the sea market dictates, which is different because of course a coffee shop can say, I want to make this much profit, here's what I'm going to charge. Right. Obviously they have to go with what people are going to pay for in the end, but I think this is the biggest challenge. And then it impacts so much else. You can't invest in a wastewater treatment for your coffee wastewater if you don't have the finances to do that. So then that gets into the groundwater, it gets into the the running water, potable water for the whole region and the whole community. And so it's not as easy as just increase the price of coffee, because if you don't have infrastructure in your area to transport the coffee to a place where you can export it, you still can't get your coffee to market. So there's a lot more goes into it, but I think it somehow all comes back to this power dynamic and this fact that sort of coffee producers are price takers. They just have to take the price that's available to them, and they lack a lot of the bargaining power and the resources and the infrastructure to make that change. So that's one of the biggest barriers for sure.
It's huge. That is,
it is huge.
I mean, you talked about inequality at the beginning, but I think that really highlighted, more in depth what you meant by that, because they really don't have the power, the decision to state their price. And so that's major.
Exactly.
For the organization, what is one of the biggest challenges that the organization faces in trying to help the communities that you're trying to support?
I think we have two challenges, and one is kind of coffee related, and one is sort of development related. And I think we sit in both. Like, I consider myself to be a coffee expert as well as a development sector expert. And I think with coffee, a lot of the funding is geared towards it's market driven. So if a producer is going to be able to make good tasting coffee, a good quality coffee, that's going to have a market, someplace for that to go, then they'll invest in that, and they'll invest in projects, for that. But it's hard because it's a little bit not what we do, right? Because I think our goal is to invest in the visions of our local partners, and sometimes their vision is not to just please the market, right? It's not like we're going to make the best tasting coffee because that's what's going to bring us money. A lot of times they want to transform the sector, and they want to do something a little bit different. And so that can be kind of hard, especially if I've just heard people kind of praise producers that can listen, and do exactly what they say, right? I mean, and just that dynamic is a little bit it demonstrates what buyers are interested in. If we can control how they do things, because it will benefit us as buyers, we'll invest. But if we can't control it, we don't want to invest. And so, when we have an organization that's sort of not trying to control what people are doing, it can be a challenge.
Opposite.
Yeah. But then on the development side, I would say what's hard is, and we've been trying to kind of combat this by developing just a common methodology of here's how we're always investing in our partners. What is it that we do, and how can we define it so that funders understand we're using the same approach with each partner, even though each partner is different. Mm-hmm. And I think we've had to do that because it's been challenging for people to understand what we do, because the typical nonprofit is we invest in, example, with water, we build wells, and maybe we'll train everyone to use the well or clean the well, or get water from the well or maintain it, and that's what we do, and we do it from community to community. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But what I think is that they have had, years or decades of building water projects. And so they're a lot better at water than we are.
Sure.
Whereas, if one of our partners says, I want to build a well, then it's like, okay, well, that's the first time one of our partners has built a well. But if we're applying for funding for a well and it's like us against this well organization, the funder is going to trust the well organization a lot more. So, I think it's been hard where we've had to find funders that are more mission aligned with kind of the work that we're doing and investing in local leaders and holistic visions. Because otherwise, it's hard for people to understand. They want to know, well, what trainings do you give, or what infrastructure do you develop, and they kind of want something easy. So it's been a learning process for us.
Yeah, no, that makes really good sense. Can you tell us about a person or a group that has touched you personally in your work?
Yeah, so many. Yeah, I think our longest standing partner at Now Africa Initiative is really the organization, and the founder, Dennis Twinamatsiko, is the person that's really touched me the most, and I think a lot of just a lot of our staff as well. It's like, it's almost a bad thing, like how kind of perfect he is for our organization, because he's kind of like the sort of person that I would compare everyone else to. Like, this is sort of the person we envision working with everywhere, and of course that's not a good thing, because everyone's different and everyone works with the community differently. But I think what touched me most is just that the community members saw him as somebody different. And so I remember, when I've been to their community there in Uganda, in a place called Namugwe Parish, and I had community members coming up to me and saying, most people, he's from the community, and he ended up getting an education, going to a university in Kampala. He worked for USAID in Liberia for a while, and he came back, and his goal was to develop the community where he grew up and where he came from. And I had just people coming up to me and saying, most people, when they leave here, they never come back, and he's just a different kind of leader. And it was like something I saw. I just could feel, like, sort of being around him, and I didn't need them to tell me, because I was like, yeah, I could just feel it, But I mean, it was nice to kind of hear that, and just like how different he was, I think it's just this servant leader mentality where it isn't really about him. It's not like a sort of the founder syndrome. It's really just about giving back and raising leaders in the community. So. Yeah, I don't know. I think just knowing that, I think knowing that people like that are out there, and that we can highlight his work as the example of like why you should invest in community-led development, and just the cost effectiveness of everything he's doing. I think he's the example. I don't know. You should interview him for sure. I think it would be an interesting.
I'd love to, if he's interested. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be a really interesting talk to hear him share about his community and his vision.
Absolutely. And so, what is the vision for the Chain Collaborative in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So it's hard to say. I mean, because we're 7 years old now, but I kind of feel like we're 5, because I think the first 2 years was like me trying to figure out what we were doing, so it kind of feels like so much has happened, and even things that we did 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined, being where we are today. So I'm sure that this answer will change every year. But I think, I think we would just really like to continue what we're doing, but take on more partners in the future. And what we want to do is we have kind of like an alumni network where the partners that we have worked with can also share opportunities and really collaborate with each other. I think that's been the biggest challenge for us is supporting a network where our partners can kind of come together and share their own experiences. I know that some partner organizations have tried to do things like this, but it really does take a lot of time to sort of be behind that network and resource it and kind of encourage people to continue talking to one another and sharing ideas. So we know it's something that we need to do really well and resource that network. But that, I think, is one of our broader goals in the future, as well as to expand our education offerings and just kind of be behind some different initiatives. I think through our special projects, we'll be involved in a lot more things, and it's good for us because it just kind of expands our own knowledge and expertise. We just started consulting on a carbon project, as well as some digitalization projects, and it's on our own we probably wouldn't build our expertise in digitalization, but here we are doing that through consulting. So I think just continuing to do more. I think that's the when I think of the term scale, it's often not I think some community-led development organizations really dislike this term because like the whole point of sort of community-led development is that it works for the community. It's going back to the idea of success. Sometimes people think success is only something you can scale. Can you like wrap this thing in a box and then ship it out to the rest of the world, and it'll, everyone will be able to access it. Yeah. And the reality is a project to me is just as successful if it works in one place, in one time. Because culturally that's the right answer for where you are and who you're with. So I think for us, scale just means really being able to do more and doing more of what's worked really well, trying new things, but not only that, right? I mean, it's the same thing with innovation. It's like as though that has to be something new all the time. And there's some things that work really well and we can continue with them, So I think for us, that's what it is. It's just having the opportunity to keep doing more of what we do well as keep learning. And that would be success for us in 5 to 10 years, I think.
Yeah, that's a great definition of success. I like that balance of learning and continuing. So
thanks. Yeah.
Well, just one more time for anyone listening, if people felt interested in, participating in what you have to offer or supporting you financially, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, the best way to reach us for supporting us financially is definitely through the website, as well as you can reach out to me. So my name is Nora, and my email is easy, nora@chaincollaborative.org. So again, you can definitely reach me and anyone at our organization through the website, and we would love to hear from you. So I always tell people, if you don't hear back from me, it's something's wrong. It got caught in the ether. So I'm like a serial responder to emails. So.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, we'll make sure that is also in the description below for anyone watching who wants to participate in everything that you're doing at the Chain Collaborative. So Nora, thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure to talk to you and hear more about your work. And
thank you.
I gotta say, I think you're doing a really great job. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and allowing me to share more about the Chain Collaborative and our partners.
Absolutely. Here at Emanate International, it is our mission to promote nonprofits and social enterprises that equip the recipients to become independent, autonomous, thriving members of society. Indeed, the Chain Collaborative is certainly doing great work to support local coffee farmers for sustainable development in their communities. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be in the know for future inspirational conversations with other leaders who are making great gains and improving our world. Thank you.